There are places in the world where the ground itself seems to tremble with memory. Israel is one of those places. It is not merely land. It is a scroll written in blood, a stage upon which the Eternal has played out in the dust and cries of generations. From the first shedding of blood in its soil to the battles of our own age, Israel has never been a stranger to sorrow, nor unfamiliar with the price of covenant. And yet, even in the midst of bloodshed, there is purpose, a divine narrative that refuses to die. The prophets saw it, the watchmen cried it out, the patriarchs walked it, and the enemy always hated it. Why? Because Israel is not just geography. It is testimony that there is a God who chooses, who enters history, who is not silent. The world rages, the kingdoms conspire, and the nations rise, but Israel remains. And it remains not in ease, but through fire. When we say Israel was bathed in blood, we do not speak in metaphor alone. We speak of a truth that is carved into the land. From the blood of Abel that cried from the earth, to the altars upon which lambs were slain in Jerusalem, to the screams in the Holocaust, to the rockets that pierce her skies in the dead of night. Blood has marked her journey, and yet we must ask, what does that blood mean? It is easy to see the blood and think only of horror, to recoil, to mourn, and mourning has its place. But if we stop there, we miss the deeper truth. Blood in Scripture has always been a paradox. It signifies both judgment and mercy, sin and atonement, death and life. When God called Abraham to a land he did not know, he was not calling him to a place of comfort. He was calling him to a promise that would cost. The blood would come, but so would the covenant. The shedding of blood in Israel is not a sign that God has abandoned her. It is a sign that she has always been part of the battle. A battle not just for territory, but for truth. A cosmic struggle between light and darkness, heaven and hell, good and evil. Israel is the center of that struggle, and when we see her suffer, when we hear the cries of war, we are witnessing more than politics, more than nations. We are witnessing prophecy unfold, but there's more, because this isn't just about Israel as a nation. This is about us. You, me, the land mirrors the life. Just as Israel has been bathed in blood, so too have our hearts been wounded. We walk through our own valleys of warfare, not with guns, but with sorrow, with betrayal, with fear, with grief. Some of us are carrying battles within that nobody sees. Our soil is soaked with emotional blood, from broken relationships, lost dreams, anxiety that won't let go, failures that define us. And yet, like Israel, our pain is not purposeless. The question is never just, why did this happen to me? But what will I do with what has happened? Will we become bitter? Will we allow the blood to stain us forever? Or will we understand deeply that pain is not the enemy of purpose, but its beginning? Israel's history teaches us this, that every time she was knocked down, she rose again, that every war ended with a rebirth, that every grave became a gate. It is in the blood that the future is born, and if that is true of Israel, it is true for you. Maybe your life has been marked by things you didn't choose. Maybe you've walked through betrayals, been the victim of cruelty, or haunted by shame. You feel like your story is written in red, not in triumph, but in tears. But I'm here to tell you, blood doesn't just speak of pain. It speaks of worth. Something only bleeds when it matters. A nation bleeds because it is chosen. A soul bleeds because it carries value. And when God allows us to walk through the valley, it is not to destroy us, but to reveal what we carry. What we were born for. Israel still stands. The desert has bloomed. The ashes of the Holocaust gave way to the anthem of resurrection. This is no accident. It is pattern. It is divine. And if it happened to her, it can happen to you. You see, when the blood cries out from the ground, heaven answers. The battle is not just physical. If it were only about tanks, guns, bombs, and borders, it would be simpler. But this war, this struggle is deeper. It is spiritual, it is ancient, it is unseen, yet it shapes everything we see. What plays out on the soil of Israel is the surface. Beneath that surface lies a war that predates time. And it's not just Israel that bleeds from this war, it's every heart that walks the earth. There's a reason the world turns its eyes to Israel every time chaos breaks out in that narrow stretch of land. There's a reason why the headlines never stop. The ground is small, but the warfare is vast. It's the same reason your life, too, feels like a battleground at times, because the fight was never just about geography. It was about identity, destiny, the promises of God, the call that cannot be revoked. Israel, from the moment of its conception, was marked not just for greatness, but for collision. The moment God called Abraham out of Ur, the battle began. The moment he said, "I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you," a line was drawn, not just in the sand, but in the heavens. And every enemy of God's purposes has hated that line ever since. What is true of Israel is true of all who bear the image of God and carry his call. The more sacred the calling, the greater the resistance. The more divine the destiny, the fiercer the attack. That's why the land is stained with conflict, and that's why you face what you face. You are not simply dealing with circumstances, you are living in the middle of a spiritual war zone. It's not just what's happening to you, it's what's happening around you, through you, because of what's within you. Darkness always seeks to extinguish what reflects the light. The enemy doesn't waste time on things that don't matter. If you're under attack, if your mind is flooded with fear, if your spirit is heavy, if you feel the weight of depression or confusion pressing on you, it's not because you're weak. It's because you're significant, and because you matter in the fight. You may not see the war, but you feel it. You feel it when you wake up with a heaviness you can't explain. You feel it when anxiety grips your chest like iron bands. You feel it when shame whispers that you're not enough, that your past defines you, that your pain is permanent. You feel it when every step forward is met with resistance you can't name. That is not random. That is not coincidence. That is spiritual warfare. The same force that wants Israel wiped off the map wants your joy erased. The same voice that accuses her day and night is the same voice that tells you you'll never be free. The enemy knows how to disguise spiritual battles as emotional chaos. He'll make it feel like it's just you, your weakness, your fault, your past, your mess, when in truth, it's a coordinated strike on your soul. And here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. Most of the time, spiritual war doesn't look like fire from heaven. It looks like the slow erosion of your hope. It looks like unanswered prayers and silent nights. It looks like numbness, like you stopped believing anything could change. The front lines of the war are not always dramatic, they're often internal. But just as Israel must stand her ground even when surrounded by enemies, you must stand yours. You must remember that the battle is not just happening to you, it's happening through you, and ultimately for you. The resistance proves the presence of purpose. The fight confirms the weight of your calling. You're not fighting alone. The same God who split the sea for his people, who stood in the furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who silenced lions for Daniel, and who still watches over Israel with neither slumber nor sleep, that same God is with you. And if he is with you, who can be against you? The battle may rage in your mind, but you're not crazy. It may thunder in your emotions, but you're not broken. It may flare up through people, through trauma, through loss, but you're not forsaken. This is war, yes, but it is war with a promised end. Israel has always been the visible sign of an invisible war, and yet she still stands. That is your inheritance too. Not a life without pain, but a life where pain never gets the final word. Not a life without battles, but one in which every battle births deeper strength, deeper clarity, deeper fire. So if you find yourself weary, don't give in. If you find yourself angry, grieving, numb, or drowning in the tides of negative emotion, don't give up. This is not the end. It is a signal that your life is not ordinary and your story is not over. The blood may be on the battlefield, but the victory is already sealed. The question isn't whether you've been wounded, it's what you will do with the wound. Because in this life, blood is inevitable. If you love, you risk loss. If you hope, you risk disappointment. If you step out, you risk failure. The human heart was never promised safety. What it was promised is redemption, and that's the key. Israel has never known peace without pain. She walks with a limp, a nation born through travail, carved out of war, reborn through ashes, and yet she does not disappear. She does not give in. She mourns, yes, but she moves. She weeps, yes, but she walks, because that's the pattern of God. Pain is not the stopping point, it's the door. There is something sacred in sorrow, something holy in hardship, not because God delights in our suffering, but because he knows what suffering can produce when surrendered. It transforms, it deepens, it awakens. Pain shakes loose the illusions we cling to. It burns away the lies we build our lives on. It clears the fog, it shows us what we truly believe, and it opens the way for something we rarely embrace in comfort, purpose. When Israel was attacked, when bombs fell and fear gripped the cities, it wasn't the end, it was the call. A call to rebuild, to defend, to return to the core, and that's what pain does to you. It calls you back. Not just to survive, but to rise, to become, to remember who you were before the world told you who you weren't. The enemy wants your pain to paralyze you, to define you, to convince you that you are forever marked by what happened to you, instead of what God can do through you. But every wound you carry can either become a prison or a platform, a scar or a seal. The choice isn't in what happened. The choice is in what you do with what happened. There's a reason Israel is a miracle. It's not just that she still exists, it's that she still hopes. That she sings again after mourning, that she plants after burning, that she creates beauty out of what was once rubble, that she takes blood, soaked ground and builds gardens. That's the picture God wants you to see, not just in the headlines in your own life. What if your deepest sorrow is not your defeat, but your beginning? What if that broken relationship, that lost dream, that moment of failure was never meant to define you, but to redirect you? What if your identity is not found in what hurt you, but in what rises after the hurt? You are not called to pretend the pain didn't happen. Israel doesn't forget her wounds, she honors them, she remembers the fallen, she mourns the destruction. But then she rebuilds. She plants vineyards on the hills once soaked in blood. She sends her children to school even under threat. Because she knows that if pain stops the movement, the enemy wins. You cannot heal by hiding. You cannot overcome what you're unwilling to face. But when you bring the pain into the light, when you lay it down before the one who sees every tear and knows every scar, something begins to change. That pain submitted becomes power. That mourning becomes fuel. That loss becomes a lens, and you begin to see not just what was taken, but what is being birthed. Some of the most powerful movements in history were born from weeping. Some of the strongest souls were formed in the fire. And some of the greatest testimonies were written in the ink of heartbreak. Don't let the enemy lie to you and say your pain disqualifies you. It may be the very thing that equips you, because the world doesn't need perfect people. It needs healed people. Honest people, people who have walked through the valley and refused to stay there, people who have mourned and moved. People who have turned their trauma into testimony, their affliction into authority. There is power in that kind of life. There is authority in the voice that has cried and still praises. There is fire in the heart that has broken and still loves. And there is victory in the life that was supposed to be over, but isn't. Israel lives because she refuses to die. And so must you. Your movement will not always be swift. Your healing will not always be easy. But step by step, day by day, you must rise. Not just for yourself, but for the ones watching you, for the ones who will one day ask how you made it through. You are showing them now what resurrection looks like, because rising is not the absence of pain, it is the presence of purpose in the middle of it. There is something sacred about blood in the Scriptures, something more than sorrow, more than violence. From the beginning, blood was never just a symbol of death, it was the sign of covenant. The first time blood touched the soil, it was Abel's crying out from the ground. And God heard it. Not one drop of blood goes unnoticed in the eyes of heaven. Not one wound, not one tear, not one trauma goes ignored by the one who weaves eternity. When Israel bleeds, the world watches, but God listens, because the blood that soaks her land is not only a cry of pain, it is the echo of promise. Every drop reminds heaven that the story is not over, that the covenant is still in effect, that the God who made promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is still watching over every hill, every valley, every soul that calls that land home. But this isn't just about Israel. This is about you, your story, your wounds, because you too have known what it means to bleed. Not in the physical sense alone, but deep, the kind of bleeding the world doesn't see, the hidden cuts, the quiet betrayals, the kind of pain that doesn't leave bruises but leaves memories. We all bleed, whether we admit it or not. The question is, what does your blood mean? The world says your pain is a tragedy, that it's random, that it should be hidden, buried, silenced, but the Word tells a different story. In the kingdom of God, blood is not the end. It is the beginning, because blood is the currency of redemption. It is the seal of the new. It is the sign that something sacred is being forged. In the days of Moses, when death was passing through the land, it was blood on the doorposts that changed everything. Not armor, not swords, not cleverness, blood, the mark of covenant. That was what stopped the destroyer. That was what covered the people. That was what declared, this house is not for death. This house is for life. You see, when the enemy sees your pain, he hopes to use it to break you. But when God sees your pain, he marks it with blood. He takes what was meant for destruction, and he turns it into a declaration. That place of bleeding, it becomes holy ground, that memory that once haunted you. It becomes the altar. That scar you've tried to hide, it becomes the evidence that death passed over, and you're still standing. There is power in the blood, not just to wash away what was, but to release what will be. Israel exists not because she avoided suffering, but because she was carried through it. Through exile, through ashes, through wars, through silence, through hell itself. But what preserved her? Not her weapons, not her alliances. What preserved her was the eternal covenant, written not in ink, but in blood. And that same power is what will carry you. You don't have to fix yourself. You don't have to erase your past. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to bring your wounds into the light of the covenant. You need to stop pretending they're not there and instead let them testify. Testify to the fact that the enemy tried to break you and failed. You were not made to carry shame. You were not created to live in fear. You were not born to be stuck in the place of pain. You were called, marked, sealed, and no matter how deep the wound, the blood speaks a better word. It speaks hope where there was despair, healing where there was trauma, clarity where there was confusion, identity where there was loss. That's why the enemy fights so hard to keep you in the darkness. Because if you ever truly understood what's been written over your life in blood, you'd stop running. You'd stop hiding and you'd rise. There is a day coming when all the blood will be accounted for, when every injustice will be reversed, when every tear will be wiped away. But until then, you are called to live in the power of what's already been done. You're not waiting for victory, you're walking in it, not because of your strength, but because of the blood that covers you. The same way it covered Israel in her darkest hour, the same way it covers you now. You've cried long enough. You've mourned long enough. You've carried guilt long enough. Now is the time to step out, to rise not in spite of your wounds, but because of them. Because your scars are not signs of defeat. They are signs of survival, and more than that, they are signs of destiny. What has been marked in blood cannot be erased.